Good evening, class. Welcome to our Chat 5. My name is Alex Baradin. I'll be your instructor for this master chat that you'll hopefully get to hear and appreciate. Today, we will talk about supply chain analysis, supply chain technologies, procurements, and mergers and acquisitions. I will also cover the assignments for the week, as well as a brief slide on the careers and certifications available to you within the area or functional area of the supply chain management. So first of all, please make sure that you have your discussion board 4 all right up, or since July 22nd is going to be the last day of our class. Please make sure that all your assignments for the course are submitted by that date, as well as IntelliPath. I'm going to grade all your work by the end of the day on Friday, so you should see your final grade then. For this week's assignment, we have another discussion board. As always, your main post is due on Friday, while your peer responses are due the following Tuesday by the end of the day. The goal for the duration is about 200 to 250 words for your main post, and about 50 to 100 words for your secondary responses. For 2 secondary responses are required in addition to your main post. In your main post, please talk about this course. Really reflect on it. What did you like about it? What are the 2-3 concepts that really stayed with you, that helped you understand supply chain better? Also, do you believe this course had certain tangible considerations that you can apply in your personal life or professional life? And finally, what could we have done better? What are some of the approaches that you would have liked to have seen in this class? Or maybe what have we done that we shouldn't have done, or what should have we done to make your experience better? We constantly try to improve this course, and this is actually, these master chats are part of our improvement process. So we're looking to get some feedback and looking to gain some insight on what you liked and didn't like about our approaches. Also, as always, your IntelliPath for week 5 is due by the end of the day on Wednesday, with a goal of getting to determined knowledge by Friday. You can always go back and improve your grade. IntelliPath doesn't close on you, so please make sure you get the best grade that you want and continue to improve throughout the course. So as we discussed in this course, all the basic topics and all the elements that are applicable to supply chain management, what do we do with it? Well, one of the natural applications of the data that we've collected is analysis. Analysis helps us to make decisions. And when you perform an analysis, it's first important to understand what is the issue. What are you trying to solve? Make that clear and make sure that you establish the root cause that you are trying to resolve. Some may use 5 whys approach to get to the real root cause of your problem. But of course, there are other methods and ways that you can get to an issue. List out the options or alternative plans that you can implement in order to solve the problem. This is the brainstorming session, and this is where you don't discount any potential solutions to your problem. Some of them might be great and might be applicable. Some of them might be out there. But at the end of the day, it's about collecting all the alternatives and analyzing. Start collecting the inputs from all subject matters. And this is where it's important to engage all stakeholders, because there could be some size of the problem or some of the areas that you might not necessarily appreciate or might not necessarily know as they're outside of your functional expertise. This is why subject matter experts matter. Build a risk register and identify each potential risk associated with an issue. Make sure that you've collected all information and identified all potential issues or all potential options to solve the problem. Finally, make sure to end with conclusion. Make sure that after you've discussed all the potential issues, you have come up with a conclusion and the recommendation that your organization can take forward. There are different ways the supply chain analysis can take place, or there are different ways to conduct your supply chain analysis. One way is a comparative analysis, which is a technique to compare your options side by side and identify potential solutions. You can look at things qualitatively as well as quantitatively. From qualitative perspective, we are looking for some of the things that we could not necessarily measure, such as quality or such as safety, things that could not necessarily have a number behind them. Or we can look at it quantitatively. Of course, quantitative methods allow us to quantify a problem or allow us to quantify solutions that we can apply. One of the other alternatives, and probably the most popular alternative for supply chain analysis, is cost-benefit analysis, which assesses the cost of each solution to a perceived benefit. And I mentioned that this is probably the most common way to analyze within the business world, but it does have some gaps. Primarily, you are missing out on the qualitative approach or qualitative aspects of the of your solutions. So for example, you're a procurement manager and you're buying ladders. You might identify the cheapest ladder out there that will give you the best return, but without getting the input from the SMEs or subject matter experts, or by missing out on the qualitative aspects such as safety, you might be risking getting your employees hurt because you've invested in ladders that are cheaper and of potentially poorer quality. Gap analysis is a technique that allows you to align the shortfall between the current and the desired state. This is where the desired state is a requirement. It could be a regulatory requirement. It could be legal or compliance requirements. For example, a few years back, US FDA had disallowed PHO fats. So at the time I worked for a food manufacturing company, and we were looking to remove all the PHOs from our formulations. And one of the we had two ways to do it. One was to reformulate the recipe with potentially coconut oil, or we could discontinue the product altogether. So this was a true example of the gap analysis. We knew where the gap was, we knew where we had to be, but we ultimately had to make a solution or had to identify a decision that would let us get there, that would make the most sense. Benchmarking analysis is evaluating your performance versus that of another company or an industry standard. And this is where I traditionally view this as a soft requirement, meaning you can do it because the rest of your competition does it, or you might decide that it's not the best option for you. So here are some of the real examples of the decisions within supply chain management, just to kind of give you an idea. And throughout this course, you will talk about some of these concepts specifically, in a week during weeks 3 and 4. First decision has to deal with buying or leasing a dedicated private fleet of trucks, or alternatively, um, bidding those out to a second person logistics or a brokerage firm, basically common carriers out there. In this scenario, we have a growing need to arrange our transportation. And really our options are to buy a fleet of truck and hire our drivers, or to outsource them to a common carrier. This is where we can utilize the cost-benefit analysis to compare the cost of each option and the benefit of each option. And in our scenario specifically here, we decided to, due to our inability to fully utilize the potential fleet and not enough of the savings to cover our costs compared to the upcharge that we get from the brokerage company, we decided to go with common carriers and brokers. Our second decision or second scenario had to do with either renting a space in a local public warehouse, or outsourcing it completely to a third-person logistics solution. Basically, in our scenario, we had an expanding inventory, potentially to seasonality or maybe getting the new business, with additional requirements to grow our warehousing space. Our options, again, were to rent a public warehouse space or outsource our warehousing altogether to a third-person logistics solution. And this is where we found comparative analysis to be helpful, because we wanted to look at things not just from the cost perspective, but also from the additional services that we gain by utilizing a 3PL solution. And here specifically, we decided that we wanted to control our own destiny. We wanted to control our own shipment, and we had enough expertise and staff to be able to rent the space and staff it with our employees. Our third scenario has to do with a relocation of our manufacturing. Currently, we are utilizing a freight equalization policy, which states that we charge the same freight independent of the origin and the destination for from our manufacturing standpoint to our clients or customer standpoint. And basically, we were comparing through the cost benefit analysis the cost to produce our goods versus cost of storing them, in addition to the shipping costs. So we decided through the cost benefit analysis to move our manufacturing assembly closer to the raw material source, and additionally the source of cheaper labor, because it was cheaper for us to ship goods or finished goods, the goods that have been established and complete, versus raw materials. So our fourth scenario had to deal with potential opportunities for backhaul or utilizing the truck for the return journey. Our company was evaluating opportunity through cost benefit analysis to save money on a freight. Basically, either having an additional person that would plan our transportation and their salary, to the cost that we would save potentially through utilizing a truck for both destination and return journeys. We did a white paper, and through the study and through the analysis, we decided that we would be able to generate the weekly schedule and have traffic coordinator that would track that schedule and ensure that our trucks would never haul empty. Next scenario dealt with congregating shipments into a single control distribution center versus shipping directly to the customer. So think of an Amazon scenario where you can either ship directly from the manufacturer to your customers, or you can have a distribution center with local deliveries, in a way that Amazon does business. So Through the cost-benefit analysis, again, we looked at the costs of leasing a warehouse and operating in a warehouse, in addition to the local transportation cost and the long haul through the truckload option, and compared it to the LTL cost, the less than truckload cost, to go to our destination directly from our manufacturer. And again, through the cost benefit analysis, we decided to go with combined shipments as it made more sense. It allowed us to save a lot of money on a long-term LTL freight or long distance LTL freight. Finally, last scenario dealt with make to order versus make to stock scenario. We had a customer that asked us to reduce our lead time. They told us that all their suppliers are currently able to ship to them within 2 weeks, whereas we were, over a month on the lead time. So this pushed us into a benchmarking analysis. We basically had to make a decision whether or not we complied to the standards of the industry. And we decided that for this business, it makes sense for us to move to a make to stock arrangement, where we would build certain safety stock and establish an agreement with that customer. So we would be responsible to keep at least a certain minimum of the inventory on hand. Meanwhile, we would be responsible to not go over certain maximum of the inventory of which they were willing to cover. This would ensure that we were protected in case they would decide to discontinue business, or if their demand falls all of a sudden, and they would be able to get their inventory almost instantly. So we would potentially be more favorable than the rest of the market. Of course, there are certain limitations of the supply chain analysis. Primarily, it's the availability of data. And this is where, I kind of like to compare the education versus real world. In education, you typically get all the information you need to solve the problem. Everything is there for you. Typically, in the real world, it's not the case. Information and data could be difficult to receive or purchase. It could be expensive, especially external data about your competition. Your competitors are not going to be eager to share that information, and you could potentially buy it from external parties, but obviously there's a cost to it. There's certain conflict of interest and lack of functional understanding, as well as potential work in silos. This is why it's so important to ensure the subject matter experts are involved in all parts of the decision. Meaning, if back to my procurement manager scenario, if I, as a procurement manager, make decisions, I need to ensure that they're functionally vetted by other functions, such as safety, such as quality, such as facilities, and so on and so forth. Of course, not everything depends on you, again, in a certain decision, as well as there's certain budget that you have to comply to. And this is why, again, it's important to not make these decisions in a vacuum and engage functional participants to provide feedback. And finally, there is risk. Risk is everywhere, and even the best analyzed decisions that made the most sense at the time that they were made, could have potential drawbacks or may potentially not realize in the way that you have expected. Next, I wanted to talk a little bit about technologies. Obviously, modern business is not possible without technologies, and modern supply chain is not possible without certain level of technological advancement and certain technological tools. Probably the best known and probably the most widely used tool out there is ERP, or Enterprise Resource Planning Solution. What it is, according to Apex, a framework of organizing defining, standardizing the business processes necessary to effectively plan and control organization so the organization can use its internal knowledge to seek external advantage. Simply put, enterprise resource planning system is your system of record, system that helps you make decisions, and a system that helps you to administrate your company. Just like I really like that flower picture because really it's in the center of all your electronic solutions, or it should be in the center of all your electronic solutions, meaning it has certain aspects of vendor management and organization. It may have certain tools that would help you manage your projects and manage your human resources. It may have certain aspects of manufacturing, statistics, recording, and metrics. Of course, it can have a finance and regulatory or fiscal reporting type of tools. And finally, it can have customer relationship management aspects or ways to ensure that your all your customer information is safe and well recorded. There are multiple vendors available in the ERP space. Probably the best known is SAP, a German company. There's also Oracle and their recent acquisition of JD Edwards, their American-based company. IBM, though in fairness, they haven't really come up with any new solutions in a while. And one that's relatively new that I've seen gain a lot of popularity is Microsoft's Dynamics. Dynamics 365, I had a pleasure of working with. The beauty of that solution is that it works with all the Office applications. We'll use Microsoft Word, Excel, Outlook, and others. And Microsoft Dynamics supports it and is able to incorporate those software tools into it. This might be a little advanced, but I wanted to give you a taste of the information and material flows as they happen within the enterprise system of records. So in my scenario, you are a consumer that go to the store to buy furniture, to a dealer. You walk around their production floor or their display floor, I should say, and you're not really finding anything. At this point, dealer or sales rep comes to you and says, "Hey, you can also custom order." So you look through their catalog and you find the one that you really like. So what you do is you leave your information with the dealer and record your address, your credit card information, your delivery times, your order information. All of that information gets recorded in customer resource management planning system. So then dealer uses that information to send electronically all of those details to the manufacturer. Manufacturer receives the purchase order and then sends it to the production floor. Their MRP, or manufacturing resource planning system, that is a part of their enterprise resource planning system, checks if the couch that you ordered is available and is ready to ship. And in our specific scenario, we'll assume it isn't. So what this MRP does is it breaks down this couch into certain components by using bill of material. It may have cloth, it may have wood, it may have springs, it may have other parts that would be required for the manufacturing to take place. All of these are then reviewed to be ordered. So the planner, the supply chain planner, potentially working in the manufacturer, will check against the vendor resource management system or vendor planning system to see where all those materials are coming from and place those orders respectively. Vendor will check and see if they have those parts available. And for the purpose of our exercise here, let's say they do. And they ask you, the planner, to pick them up. So planner uses transportation management system, or TMS, to schedule the delivery. TMS largely works similar to Uber. It has the starting point, it has a destination point, which is your vendor and your manufacturing facility. You provide it through uploading your purchase order information for these raw materials with the parts, their weights, their NMFC classification, or the inept knowledge that is required by the carrier to give you the rate. And then you're able to schedule the transportation. So your carrier arrives, or manufacturer's carrier arrives to the vendor's location. They pick up the item and deliver to the manufacturing floor. At this point, the manufacturer has everything they need to produce the couch. The couch gets manufactured and it gets sent to, and is ready to be sent to you. It gets recorded, and now it's in our warehouse management system, the system of record for everything that is in our inventory, as well as information that tells us where exactly it is. At this point, manufacturer will either communicate with a dealer to get more information about where exactly to deliver the product to, or they might even work directly with you as a buyer. So again, the planner might use transportation management system and provide them information about your destination, about the pieces, here specifically couch that is being shipped, as well as your contact, you as a customer. So the carrier gets all the information. Most likely they'll contact you and schedule an appointment, and you finally get your couch that you've ordered. Now, since your information is stored in customer relationship management system, most likely you might see some advertisement coming your way. Now that you bought the couch, what about a coffee table, or what about the end table, or what about vase, or cushions, or whatever it may be. And this is how all the aspects of the ERP, or enterprise resource planning system, are working together to document and ensure that flow of information and execution of all the manufacturing activities and delivery activities within the extended enterprise. Next aspect I wanted to talk about is blockchain. Blockchain is an integrated and interlinked or interduplicated system of records, or also known as blocks, that are openly distributed and interverifiable. So as a part of the global blockchain, you have multiple computers, or thousands really of computers around the world, or other servers that keep certain information and interduplicate that information for interverifiability. The first application of blockchain was financial, Bitcoin, because there had to be a way to reward people to sell their processing resources. Because in order to interduplicate records and replicate those records, you have to have some processing power. So that processing power was rewarded by Bitcoins, which was a decentralized peer-to-peer digital currency. Within supply chain, of course, there are many potential applications for blockchain. One of them being creation of transparency. Transparency is extremely important for the supply chain management. You always want to know what's happening with your deliveries, what's happening with materials, what's happening at your supplier. How are they manufacturing your products? And you as a part of the supply chain, you want to know where your products are coming from. And this is the beauty of the the transparency that's created by the blockchain technology, because these records are interduplicated and replicated. There's no way to counterfeit information. And theoretically, with utilization of the blockchain technology, you know exactly when something has happened, you know exactly of any issues in the chain, and you know exactly when the product is expected to be delivered to you. And I remember, uh, early in my career, I was talking to a seasoned professional, and we were tracking transportation all around the U.S. And I said, don't you wish there was a list of little green lights that would move across the map, and as soon as you have an issue with one of your trucks, you would turn red. Well, blockchain is a potential future for that technology and a potential application that would deliver just this result. Of course, as consumers, we really want to know about counterfeit. We really want to make sure that the products we buy are authentic and original, and something that was produced by the original manufacturer. And that's exactly the application that or the result of the application of the blockchain technology. It allows us to see if that handbag or that piece of clothing was produced by the original manufacturer, because we see and we can trace it exactly to the source. We can almost see, if we drink milk, we can tell which farm it came from, and potentially even which cows were part of the uh, flock, or part of the part of those that has given the milk that we're drinking. Finally, um, contract management. And DocuSign is actually one of the applications of blockchain. I don't know if you've used DocuSign at any point. Ultimately, it's a technology that allows you to sign documents electronically. And it was particularly big during the pandemic because we were unable to meet in person, and it was important to be able to sign these documents remotely. So blockchain allows for authenticity, so it can prove that the intended recipient, through the confirmation of the uh, email and the IP address that was used to sign the document, they can say when it was signed. It has a geotag to see where it was signed, and through IP address, it tells us which computer was used to sign the document. And again, that remote application is critical, especially where it was critical during the pandemic, and this continues to be critical for the ease of and security of remote contracting authority. In this chat, I've talked about the analysis and decision making. Now I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the technologies available specifically for decision making. And naturally, they're called decision support systems. And there's so many of them. Literally, just about any tool can be called decision support system, as ultimately it's anything or any tool or electronic tool that lets and allows us to or helps us make decisions. Again, there's a wide variety of these tools, with some of them being completely automated, some of them being very manual, and only controlling or automating certain steps of decision making. But they all have something in common. They all rely on data. So the first aspect of the decision support system is data management. Without data, we are really not making an educated decision. We're following the gut feel. Data management interacts with the model management. So model is the list of constraints that we have, the list of rules. It could be our budgets, it could be our seasonal demands, it could be our capacity. It's the rule of the games, or the rules of the game, I should say. Um, there's a user interface aspect. This is where you get to ask your question. This is where the analysis comes from. You ask, what is the most efficient way for me to ship from, Seattle to New York? So this is that GUI that allows us to collect questions. And final aspect is knowledge management. Knowledge management is the piece of technology or artificial intelligence that collects the information about the data being available, the capacity constraints or certain other constraints that are part of our model and what we're trying to optimize, and the task that comes from the user. And this piece varies, from tool to tool. It could be, again, highly automated. It could be self-learning. It could be predictive. It could use past information on the success or failure of each decision to improve its decision-making ability. And that's really what's been getting a lot of additional attention in recent years. This topic of procurement probably deserves a lot more time that we have, but I did want to touch on it and did want to give you some basics of the procurement management, especially as we get into the topic of the mergers and acquisitions. Procurement is a process of specifying requirements, identifying the sources for our products that we're buying, evaluating potential options, and acquiring resources that are fit for our purpose, cost-effective, and sustainable. And this is where it's important to distinguish or define the word sustainable. Sustainable is not necessarily just green, though this is what a lot of people know it as, but it's also something that you can keep repeating. As if I'm a manufacturer from a Ford company, yes, I want to buy cheaper tires, but I want to buy them from the vendor that's going to keep coming back to me, somebody that I'm going to continue to rely on. So, if you are somebody that has, 4 new tires and they might be perfectly fit for a Ford car, most likely they're not going to buy it from you because they're going to want to buy from somebody that can keep selling it to them, even if you sell it to them, for half the price of their vendor. And this is where the sustainability in a repetitive form comes from. So again, the steps in the procurement are specifying requirements. This is where we collect our requirements and we identify what exactly we need to procure. We identify the suppliers that meet that requirement. We identify the supplier that best suits our needs based on the fitness of use, cost effectiveness, sustainability, and could be other considerations that are important to us. It could be collaborative nature. It could be partnership that we've established with them previously, or their reputation. And we manage that relationship. This is where it's important to keep coming to the vendor and keep them invested in our partnership. If we have a vendor that is interested in that relationship, they might be more willing to go above and beyond of what is being requested. It's not uncommon in the business world to have your vendor come and audit your facility and tell you maybe some of the things that you could do better, or give you some recommendations. For example, when I worked for a food manufacturer, we would have packaging vendor come in and inspect our packaging equipment and give recommendations. They were the packaging experts, so they would tell us exactly what we can do to make our packaging processes better. In addition, they may come up with a better application of their technology, so better um, packaging materials that would help us save money. One example is, I don't know if you've ever seen at Starbucks, you could buy those little cookies that are covered in chocolate. So Starbucks used to have them packaged in a film that would have a little green paper sticker on it. Well, a packaging company actually made the recommendation to the manufacturer that or vendor that sells these to Starbucks, and I'm very familiar with the situation as uh, kind of part of the decision to move to it. But ultimately, what they suggested was replace that sticker with a paint on film, and that saved 5 cents per one single chocolate unit or that little cookie. And it doesn't seem like a lot, but Starbucks around the world sells millions of these. So now each one of them has a saving of 5 cents. And this translates to a tremendous saving for a company. And they were able to accomplish it through managing that relationship and through building that collaboration. And naturally, then again, in the procurement, you have a dilemma. You can either diversify your procurement or buy from multiple vendors. This, of course, reduces the risk of one single vendor failing you. But also, it's unlikely that there's going to be a lot of collaboration because you're just not the piece of somebody else's business for them to be willing to invest in you. Also, you are not protected from large market disruptions. If you have a large disruption where all your vendors are impacted, not one of them is going to be very interested in specifically ensuring that you are supplied because you're, again, not a big part of their business. Again, if you are part of the aggregated procurement, this is where you only have one or maybe two vendors for each one of your items. Vendors are a lot more likely to work with you because they know that you have nowhere to go and you work with them. You're a big part of their business. If you're 25 or 50% of somebody's business, you better believe that they're going to try to take care of you because they want you to keep coming back. Potentially, this can even cost you less because, again, you have a better negotiating power with that vendor because they know that you're a big part of their business and they don't want you to leave. Also, there's trust. They might not risk as much or they might not help to forecast as well because they're protected and you're working together and exchanging that information and giving each other feedback on the operations, which again serves that end customer and potentially could improve the relationship with your end customers as the world now is competing as supply chains and not necessarily as individual enterprises. Finally, I wanted to talk about the mergers and acquisitions and large system acquisitions. And broadly speaking, mergers and acquisitions is a process of organizational consolidation. So instead of two companies, we now have one, whether it happened through a purchase of one company by another company, or it could be a collaborative merger where they combine into a single enterprise to work together. And merger and acquisition process, again, this is a very complicated work and that requires a lot from both organizations. I did want to talk about some of the key aspects of it and some of the important considerations to keep in mind. First of all, ensure that the supply chain teams of both companies are involved. This allows to ensure that the operations are smooth, the carryover and go live goes smoothly, and all the learnings take place. So there's both the as is information that is being exchanged and to be information or to be status that is getting captured. I've thrown some questions in here. Obviously, they're more related to planning and customer service side of things. But ultimately, once the intentions are known, so once one company says, all right, we want to buy this other company, and both agree on the terms, there is a due diligence process. What it is a process of audit or investigation, on both sides of the company. If it's a merger, both of these companies want to do the due diligence. Basically, it's insurance, it's analysis of everything that could impact the success or failure of the shared enterprise. Typically, both companies start with assembling a team that does the due diligence investigation. Supply chain, finance, technology experts, legal, information technologies. It's the SMEs, the subject matter experts that can help study the information or study the data and come up with the information and come up with decision of whether or not this merger or acquisition isn't a good idea for both companies. We create a checklist. We create a list of information that we need. It could be financial information, the asset registers with potential risks, list of clients, list of vendors, and so on and so forth. This is any information or data that could be useful for us to make an informed decision. Typically, there's a confidentiality agreement, agreement that no information will be shared until it is agreed to or until it's available to public. Information is requested and information is exchanged either electronically or through data packets. And there's typically a set of meetings, regular meetings, where both sides of the equation are able to ask questions based on the data that was collected, questions based on the decisions that were made or information that was gathered. And this is where that information is created, the decisions are being made. There's information on both what is status and what is to be status. How is that combined enterprise can create value for both organizations? There's a risk assessment that is done basically to assess what can go wrong. Obviously, not everything can be planned for, but we want to at least attempt looking into everything that could potentially go wrong, any issues that we can potentially have as a combined enterprise, and come up with our potential recourse or mitigation strategy. And finally, at the end of the due diligence process, there is a recommendation by both teams, whether or not they see synergies, see potential for improving the operations of both companies, or maybe it's a pass. We've studied the data, we've come up with information, and we don't think this merger and acquisition is a good idea. Because at the end of the day, what you want to see is two companies together operating better and more efficiently than each single company independently. So this kind of talks about some of the steps that are combined. Ultimately, engaging in the due diligence, formulating the as is or collecting the data, formulating the to be or what are the operations expected to look like, where do we see the savings, where do we see the efficiencies gains, and so on and so forth. And it's important, again, to engage all SMEs into these studies, as much as is possible. There's some great information on use, especially in the large system acquisitions, whether they are through merger systems or acquisitions of independent companies or enterprise resource planning system acquisitions, or any other large capital assets that change or have an impact, potentially change the way um, the company operates. And finally, I did want to talk briefly about some of the careers and certifications available within supply chain management. And some of them, when we talk about the careers, we have a list of elements that we will discuss or we discussed in the discussion board, such as warehousing, transportation, the import and export, the part of traditional logistics, inventory management, reverse logistics, the outsourcing of logistics if it's not necessarily part of your organizational expertise, because at the end of the day, you want to do what you do well and try to find partners to help you do what maybe you're not so good at. Distribution channeling, production planning, or either planning for long-term manufacturing needs or the visible planning or intermittent near site planning, demand planning and forecasting, project management, especially when it comes to supply chain technologies or supply chain product introductions, and of course procurement. And each one of them has, its own career path. Potentially, of course, there are some vague or maybe more vague type of career path, such as, just general supply chain manager or analyst. It could go into a combination of these supply chain functional areas, or one that the company agrees is an ultimate application for that resource. And again, we have different paths for each one of these. Within warehousing, we can have warehousing manager, we can have physical operators of equipment, or warehousing clerks and associates. Within transportation, we have transportation managers, logistics managers, professionals that are responsible for indirect procurement or negotiating freight with the carriers, traffic coordinators and analysts. Within the inventory management, we have both analysis aspects and control aspects. How do we ensure that our inventory is within control, it doesn't shrink, as well as we plan for how much we buy or how much we produce. From the import and export perspective, we have analysis aspects, we have compliance aspects and brokerage aspects. From the industrial engineering perspective, or reverse logistics, we can design how our flows of supply chain go through, or how we operate as a supply chain system, and how do we get our products to our end consumer. Finally, we have distribution channeling, we have production planning, demand planning, type of management, sales and operations planning. And on the procurement side, we have procurement management, or negotiating our contracts, and material call off or buying when we have an existing contract and we bring inventory according to it. Generally speaking, from the certification perspective, there are multiple certifying bodies. Probably the best known are, APEX, which was recently acquired by ASCM, or Association for Supply Chain Management. They offer CPIM certification, which deals with inventory and warehousing, CLTD, which deals with transportation and again, warehouse management, general CSCP type of certification, which deals with all aspects of supply chain management for more broad knowledge of supply chain. They have GLA which again deals with the specified transportation and logistics. SCORP, which is their proprietary system of decision making and value stream mapping. APA, or American Planning Association, has AICP, which deals specifically with outsourcing, with short and long-term planning through their accreditation. And of course, we have some of the more specific type of certifications, PMI, or Project Management Institute, that deals with project management. They have CAPM and PMP certifications. CUSECO, which is a custom brokerage type of certification, and SC Pro, the supply chain, general supply chain program from CSCMP that could be worth checking out as well. And that is all for my lecture. Thank you for listening, and have a good night. All right.